You're listening to Cornerstone West Los Angeles.
We have been in the little letter to the Thessalonians for a few weeks now. I want to be careful with our time, but I also want to give you a little bit of background because I think it's important. So if you've been here for a while, you know that like last fall, we started a series of sermons which we took clear through the spring. We talked about discipleship, what it means to be a disciple, a follower of God. And we walked out through the Old Testament, we walked through the New Testament up to the last chapter. Sorry about my microphone. It seems to be wanting to leave my face. There we go. Is that better? Through the last chapter of Matthew, where Jesus says to his disciples, go and make disciples. And that order goes to them, and they pass it right along to their disciples who pass it along, right down through the generations to us, right? That's a direct line from Jesus right to us in disciple making and being called to be people who both follow God and grow in learning how to follow God, and also in bringing people kind of behind us along, being disciples ourselves of people who are more spiritually mature, and discipling those who are less spiritually mature to come to the level that we're at least as we're growing. And that's something that I think we say, yes, that's good. We live in a country where we like to have experts do that, put everybody in a classroom with a professor who knows, a professor of discipleship perhaps, and have them do that. That's not my call. But I think what when we read this letter, what we see is that it's quite not true. And so coming right out of that series into looking at this letter is, I think, powerfully an example of that. We call it Portrait of a Pastor. But one of my issues with talking about pastors that you look at that passage and you say, okay, Scott and Jim, that's what you guys are supposed to be doing right now because you're pastors, right? So we're just having a nice little information session so we can keep you in line to do what you're supposed to be doing. But I beg to differ. That is not the case. What is the case is that Paul, in this letter himself, is setting an example for the Thessalonians to follow. He's showing them what it is like to be a Christian, what it is like to live this out. And as he does so, he's inviting them to be pastoral among themselves and then beyond themselves as well. And the background of this letter is that he goes there to set up a church. For 3 or 4 weeks, things are in the process of moving toward that. Pretty soon, the word gets out that this new religion is established and that they have a king who is not Caesar. They have some other king that is not Caesar. And that in the Roman Empire would be treasonous. And the civic leaders are very, very concerned about that. And so it behooves Paul and his assistants, his associates, Timothy and Silas, to get out of town. And they do so, and they leave this little nascent church behind. And he doesn't even have them fully trained up yet, but he has to flee. So he goes. He's now probably in Corinth at this point, and he sent Timothy back on a little stealth mission to find out what's going on there. And Timothy comes back, grinning from ear to ear. They're fine. They're doing well. In the face of opposition and persecution and a lot of trouble, they're actually doing okay. And Paul is ecstatic. And so he writes this letter to them. And in the first couple of chapters, he's kind of rehearsing kind of their background. But in the midst of that, we see Paul very personally. We see his heart. And that's the part that we're looking at in these first 3 chapters. In chapters 4 and 5, he begins to teach them the very thing that he says in this letter, we'll quote it in a minute, that has been lacking. He didn't get to finish his discipleship. So he takes up one thing here and another in the second letter, 2 Thessalonians, to teach them. And he wants to go back and see them face to face, and it looks like in chapter 20 of Acts he actually got to do that. But that's not the part that we want to focus on. What we want to do is say he is talking to them about being pastors. He is talking through them to us as they have carefully preserved this letter and passed it around and made copies, and it comes down to other believers, and then it comes right on down to us. And we are sister church with the Thessalonian church, and we hear this now as Paul giving us an example of what it is like to care for each other, to look over each other, to be a part of each other and to walk through difficult times together. So we're going to read in chapter 3. If you've got a Bible, grab it. If you don't, there's one in the pew. And we're going to take 1 Thessalonians, starting with verse 6 in chapter 3, and just read to the end of that chapter there. Paul writes this: "But now that Timothy has come to us from you and has brought us the good news of your faith and love, and reported that you always remember us kindly and long to see us as we long to see you." And then your Bible may have a dash there. Some Bibles have a period, but it should be a dash, because what he does, he stops in mid-sentence, as Paul often does, and decides he wants to say something else, and so he starts kind of a new sentence here and goes on in verse 7. "For this reason, brothers, in all our distress and affliction, we have been comforted about you through your faith. For now we live, if you are standing fast in the Lord. For what thanksgiving can we return to God for you, for all the joy that we feel for your sake before our God, as we pray most earnestly, night and day, that we may see you face to face and supply what is lacking in your faith. Now may our God and Father himself and our Lord Jesus direct our way to you, and may the Lord make you increase and abound in love for one another and for all, as we do for you, so that he may establish your hearts blameless in holiness before our God and Father at the coming of our Lord Jesus with all his saints." And you can kind of see that toward the end there, he really packs a lot of stuff in there, doesn't he? And those last 3 verses, they are a prayer. He says, I'm going to pray for you, and then he writes the prayer down so we can see exactly what he prayed. And this is what Paul does. This is part of his exampling. So I want to start with verse 8, where he says, "Now we live." Don't you just love that? I mean, you can see Paul's heart there, like, yay, yay, I left you in all this trouble and all these dire straits, and you're doing great. And you know how that makes me feel? How excited I get because you're doing well? Do we ever say that phrase, "now I really live"? We usually say that like when we win the lotto, right? Or when our Super Bowl team just cranks it, or something like that, right? That's when we really live. We dance around. I don't know what we do, but those are our times of real excitement or something. Karen and I and Stephen were in Hawaii a few years ago visiting a friend, and we came back through Honolulu, and we really weren't staying in Honolulu. We just had to get there because our plane left early the next day, and so Karen had made a reservation in one of the beach hotels just for a regular room. You know, we might walk on the beach, but we weren't looking for anything fancy. We just needed to sleep. But we got to the counter, and there was some discussion back there, and I thought, are we wanted criminals? What are they talking about? I'm always a little paranoid when people talk about me. Then they came to us and they gave us a key, and they gave us a little kind of a credit card-like thing. And it said on it, penthouse level. It was the elevator, you know, you can get to the top floor that commoners can't get to when you stick that in the elevator slot. And we had one of those. And it scared me for a minute. I said, I don't think you've got the right people here for the penthouse level card. And he said, no, that's okay. And so I said, all right, now, is this going to cost me like $3,000 for our night's sleep here? And she said, no. He says, the penthouse isn't being used tonight. And we thought we should put some money in there, so we picked you. This is the honest truth. You can ask Karen, it's truth. And so we go to the elevator, right? And we get in with all these people, and then we stick in our penthouse card. It's so cool. And everybody kind of looks at us as they get off, because we're still in there, and the people on the lower floors are all gone. And we go up, and the door opens, and we go into this magnificent, it's the top floor of the hotel, okay? It's like 8 rooms, huge, high ceiling, furniture like, you know, you'd never buy it for your home. It's just absolutely gorgeous. I mean, there's fruit on the table. There's wine chilling that doesn't have a, this is yours for $8 thing on it. It's just free. You can just drink it, you know? And there are these huge sliding glass doors that open onto like Diamond Head and on the ocean and the beach. It's gorgeous. The bathroom was bigger than our apartment, actually, and that's true. Bigger than our apartment. And it was just magnificent. And Karen turns to me and she says, now this is really living, right? And that's that line. That's what Paul says, right? Except that we're talking about opulence. He's talking about people he loves who are doing well. And I think, wow, how do we steal that? What makes us say that in our Christian lives? Do you know someone that you've been praying for that you really wanted to know Jesus, and they wake up one day and they get it and they figure out who he is and the reality of him, and they change, and you say, yes! This is what makes me really live. Or like these baptisms, where people have made that decision and they action it here, right in front of us. The reason we applaud is because we get it, right? It's like, wow, good on you. And those moments, they're amazing. I love to hear people come and say to me, hey, a miracle happened. My sister's cancer, all gone. And I know God's done it. And I really live at moments like that, don't you? That's what he's calling us to do. That's what he's showing us his heart. And that's how he lives. And what does he do when that happens? You have to look at this. This is kind of amazing to me. So he's been praying for them, right? He's been praying and worried and going before God for them. And so he says in verse 9, for what thanksgiving can we return to God for you? For all the joy that we feel for your sake before our God. This is what he's going to do. He says, as we pray most earnestly, night and day, that we may see you face to face and supply what is lacking in your faith. So he's been praying for them, and his action step from his feeling of being really alive is to pray harder. Now, I don't know how you do, but someone says to me, I'm doing my college exams, or I've got this job interview or something like that. Would you pray for me? And I write it down, right? And then I pray for them. And then they call me or I call them and they say, hey, I got the job. And I say, great, so glad. Check that one off. That's off my prayer list, right? That's all. I go on to other things, right? What does Paul do when you call him up and say, hey, we're doing great? He says, all right, I'm praying for you harder. I'm going to pray for you day and night now. And he says, how does he phrase it? As we pray most earnestly. What does that mean to you? What do you do most earnestly in your life? Yeah, me either. Couldn't think of a thing. What do we do most earnestly? In the Greek, it's the word for pleading, and the Greek word hyper on the front of it. It's like he's hyper praying for you now. And not only is he hyper praying, but he's getting up at night to do it as well. How would you feel if you got that letter? How would you feel to know that Paul's doing that for you? Who do we do that for? Who do we double down before God for because our prayers were answered? And I think what an example to us. What a ministry. What a great love he has. And of course, that's the very next thing he says, right? He goes from that to saying that he actually says the prayer itself. So he says that what he's going to pray for is to see you face to face. And if you go to verse 11, where the prayer starts, because he actually writes a prayer in here for us to look at, right? Now may our God and Father himself and our Lord Jesus direct our way to you. There it is, right? Wants to see them face to face. Can I stop just a minute here and ask you about face to face? Because I think we do a whole lot of stuff in friendship that's not face to face, right? We do it with social media, Facebook, things like that. And we have a volume of friends, but we don't have the depth of friends. And we know that we really can't, because if you're going to see somebody face to face in Los Angeles, it means you're going to drive for an hour both ways, right? That's just how we do, right? And if you're going to be friends face to face, you got to spend time with somebody. Your face has to be close to their face. Now, they didn't have quite the same setup there, but I think one of our issues is that in our culture, we are provided with means of connecting with people that allow for people, profit-making people, to get in between us, to provide something that we can connect, and maybe some advertisements around the side, right? And that's a very, very powerful way to kind of set up a new definition of friendship and to interfere with it at the same time. And I don't have anything against Facebook. I think it's fine. It's really good for connecting with people you went to high school with like 1,000 years ago. But one of my issues is we are called to be people who connect face to face, who really get deeply into each other's lives. And I think there are reasons besides Facebook that we don't. I think that's easy, so we do that. But one of the other issues that I think many of us have is we didn't grow up with face-to-face stuff going well. Many of us grew up in families that were not real face-to-face happy. I was in one of those families. My family kind of blew up, and people kind of scattered. And so when I was 18, I was out of there. I was gone. I did not want to be at home anymore, and so I made my own way. And in the process of doing that, I took my broken family spirit with me out there, and was fairly defensive, but did okay. A couple of years later, I joined a fraternity, and one of the guys in the fraternity we just kind of connected. It was a little awkward because his father was dean of students at the college, and I had had some encounters with the dean of students at the college, and they were not pretty. And that's as far as I'm going to go telling you that part of my life. But we actually made a friendship out of that, and I remember, for me, what was a critical moment of that. We went to there was like a national fraternity convention in Denver. We were in Albuquerque. We drove together to Denver and went to the conference. And on the way back, we stopped, and he called his dad. And his dad said, "Hey, we're up at the cabin. That's about halfway between where you are and Albuquerque. Why don't you guys stop by on the way back?" And so he came out. This is before cell phones, so he was in a booth. He came out and he said, "We're going to go see my family, if that's okay with you." Well, it was not okay with me, but there wasn't much I could do. I was in the car, so we went that way. And we were driving down this highway in the midst of a huge forest in northern New Mexico, and there's a dirt road that goes off this way, and he turns off on that. And I say, is there a village, or I see these condos, or whatever? He says, "No, it's just us. This is our road. We have a cabin a mile down in the woods. This is really an isolated place." And I'm starting to get really nervous because I don't know what's going to go on down there, right? And so we drive down, and I see somebody walking up the road, and that worries me even more. But he stops the car, and he jumps out, and he runs and hugs him, and I recognize it's his father. His father's walked down the road to meet him. And I start thinking, that's weird. My dad would never do that. And so it's their road, right? So they just leave the car there and get the suitcases out, and we all walk down the road together. And he and his dad are holding hands. This is a college student. I had never seen, I see 6-year-olds hold their father's hand. I had never seen a college student who wanted to hold his father's hand. And his mom was there, and his 2 brothers and his sister, and I think there was an aunt and uncle or some other larger part of the community. And they loved each other. They wanted to be together. They were delighted to be together. They shared, they talked about intimate things, they told their struggles. I mean, they did all this, and I'm sitting there thinking, what have I gotten myself into? Who are these people? But somewhere inside me, I knew this was healthy family. This was what it's supposed to be like. These people were supposed to be telling these things. It was my family that wasn't healthy. And I got a glimpse of what that looked like. When I became a believer, I recalled that model. And I thought, we're called to be not just family, we're called to be healthy family. We're called to be family the way it was meant to be. And for a lot of us, that takes some work. And that takes giving up some defensiveness. But one of the reasons that Cornerstone has and emphasizes strongly community groups is because we're calling people to be face-to-face with each other and to love each other, to get into each other's lives and to care about each other and walk through things together and grow together and think together about how we are damaged and need to repair and be the people that we repair with. That's the face-to-face part. And when he says, "I want to see you face-to-face," it matters that he says that. And he continues on with this kind of talk where he's saying that he wants to see them. And in the prayer, he says, "May the Lord make you increase and abound in love for one another." That's verse 12. "And for all." And I want to talk about both those parts very quickly. May the Lord make you increase and abound in love. what does the word love mean to you? It means practically nothing to me. I grew up in the 60s. I'm a love child, okay? So it's like 60s, flower power and all that stuff. That's what love meant. Love meant like a good feeling somehow, hopefully drug-induced. But what does drug mean to you? What does love mean to you? I know what drugs mean to me. Here's my coffee, by the way, speaking of. But what does the word mean to you? It means nothing almost, right? It's been so badly used and so redefined that we really kind of struggle to understand what the word means anymore. But can we understand that it means a self-sacrificing, high regard for each other, where I want to give up stuff for myself to come alongside of you, and you want to give up stuff to come alongside of me. And we want to support each other. We want to get in the trenches with each other and be praying before our God and be contributing into each other's lives somehow and connecting frequently, not infrequently, and living together in the growing that we're doing here. It's really hard to get that that's the meaning of love that God intends, but it is. When you read these first 3 chapters of Thessalonians very carefully, you see Paul's love in every sentence, in every piece of sentence, as a matter of fact. What does he say up higher? That Timothy's brought this good news of your faith and love and reported that you are always remembering us kindly, long to see us as we long to see you. For this reason, brothers, in all our distress and affliction, we have been comforted about you through your faith. For now we live if you are standing fast in the Lord. If you are standing fast in the Lord. He cares that they are, right? He's pushing them towards that. He wants to come back later on, he says, and supply what's lacking in your faith. He cares about that, right? These things matter to him. They're on his mind. There's a fatherly sense to this that he carries with him, and it matters that he carries that. He writes, may the Lord make you increase and abound in love. Abound is a very big word, isn't it? Do I get that right? Isn't abound like big? I mean, you have stand up, right? You have jump, and you have abound, which is like, abound means you have a lot of. Okay, I'm just getting blank stares. Does abound mean something to you? Okay, everybody understands that word? Okay. Again, increase and abound in love for each other. My gosh. And then he adds, and for all, which means it's not a closed community, right? I'm to love you, and the next person who walks in the door wanting to be part of this and figuring out what we're about. For all. I can say I love the whole world, but that means nothing. The issue is, can I love the next person who walks through the door, or start the process of connecting into their lives as well? And again, we talk about community groups because this is too big to be able to do it. We have to find a size group that we can manage to love and care for and not completely exhaust ourselves. And we can do that. That's what we're doing here as Cornerstone. Then the 13th verse occurs. So that, he says. In other words, the loving part is so that he, meaning God, may establish your hearts blameless in holiness. And let me just talk quickly through each of those words. Establish. You know the big hole over here where they're going to build a building? Have you seen that thing? We're all going to cave into it one of these days. But before we do, right now I understand they're driving rods down to hold the building. It's going to go down into the bedrock, right? Bedrock's, I guess, way down around here. You have to drive really long to get down there. But the idea is to establish that building firm, right? He's asking God to drive rods from our hearts right into God's heart, to hold us firm in Him. That's what His love looks like. And He's establishing what? Our hearts. There's another one of those vague words that you don't know how to quite say, right? What are our hearts? In the Greek, that would be like the alive, thinking, feeling, willing, acting, doing, remembering, hurting, loving part of you. the core of you that's here, not the social overlay, but the core of you is your heart. Maybe soul would be better a word for you if you find a word that we don't really have a good word for that. Actually, hearts is a good word, but we kind of destroy it by using it for other things and taking the power of that word away. The deepest part of you be established blameless in holiness. Blameless comes at the cross, which is why we gather here with symbols of the cross with us, right? This happened 2,000 years ago with Jesus' death on the cross. A man who came willingly ready to die. He came saying, this is what I'm here for, is to die for you. I am your sacrifice. And I've had so many people to me say over the years, I've done nothing wrong. There's no reason for a sacrifice. There's no reason for him to do that. Misunderstanding that the blame is familial. It comes down from our parents and our ancestors. It is blame for taking the king's authority and wanting it for myself. It is wanting for me to be number one rather than for God to be number one. It is standing apart from him and saying, not you, but me. And I'll tell you this, it's inherent in us. As one person said to me, from a baby's first cry when it wants milk more than it wants its mother to sleep, we have selfishness. That's good. That's good. We know inherently we are selfish people. We know inherently that can't stop. And if there is no God, and if we are here just as somehow amazingly conscious biological entities, then it is entirely proper. But if there is a real God and we are created people, then it is no longer proper. And it somehow needs to be answered. And we couldn't answer it, so Jesus did. God himself came and made the price paid, sacrificed himself, that we can now be blameless and come back to him. And what are we blameless in? We are blameless in holiness. Okay, that's another word that has to be defined, right? What is holiness? It's like spooky somehow. It's like people with incense burners or something. It's like, what is it? It's like, weird places. Well, the definition of holiness here, I think is best is, it is the character of God. It is the character of God. And we are being invited to step into that, little at a time. If you read Paul's letters, he's always saying, put off your old self and put on the new one. That's what he's saying. Quit having your character as the ideal character and start having God's character as the ideal character. God's ethics, his way of thinking, his concern for others, his purpose in life, the way he lives in community, God's character. You start in Genesis and start reading through, and what you'll see is God encountering people, interacting with them over and over and over and over and over again. Look when you read those, not for the moment or for what Moses is doing. Look for what God is doing. Look at his character. Look how he reacts or how he acts or how he intercedes or how he comes after somebody. All the things that you see in God's character are teaching moments for us. And then Jesus comes, right? And Jesus tells Philip, if you want to see God, look at me. Jesus is exactly the character of God. He is God's Son. And we have now a living, walking human example who's well documented in our Bibles. Well documented. And then Paul comes along and writes all these letters that are basically telling us exactly how to be people like God. People who are holy. That's what it means. People who are holy. Okay, you got that? We saw a movie this weekend, Legend of Tarzan. Have you seen it? Oh, it's good. It's a real actioner. 2 hours of solid action. So Tarzan runs around and he fights gorillas and he fights lions and he fights corrupt natives and he fights European soldiers and he just fights all kinds of stuff. And he gets his arm gets dislocated. He gets bitten. He gets beat up. He gets imprisoned. He gets, and of course they got Jane. He has to rescue Jane. But more than that, he's got to really, get rid of the bad guys. And the favorite moment where everybody cheers is when the crocodiles eat the bad guys. And they, yes. And so it's a true action movie, right? And so all this is happening on the screen, and I'm watching this, and it suddenly occurs to me, I'm laying in this kind of Barca lounger in the theater, right, with my feet up and the upper part of the chair back, like I'd be at home, right, watching some sport event or something like that. I got my big bag of popcorn here, right, and my soda over here, and I'm having an adventure in the jungle, right, sort of vicariously, but there I am doing all these things with Tarzan, and I'm suddenly thinking, this is how we like to have adventures, right? This is the way we like our adventures. I'm safe, he's in peril, but I get to watch. I get to go along with him every step of the way. That's what we like, right? That's our form of adventure. We are invited to be in an adventure of God's reclaiming his kingdom. We're invited to be people who come alongside God in a specific place and a specific time to be his agents in doing exactly this. It's an adventure. It's an adventure. We're supposed to be up on the screen. We're the Tarzans, right? We're the ones who are supposed to be swinging through the jungle of Los Angeles and the jungle of our families or our neighborhood or something like that, and encountering issues and moments and struggles and coming alongside and being exhausted for people and giving up some of our resources to help somebody else. And all those things are part of our adventure that we're doing. We are ourselves an actioner, right? We're an adventure movie before God. And so when we look at this and we see what Paul's doing with the Thessalonians, who, by golly, boy, are they an adventure, right? They're trying to turn around a town that Caesar himself is watching, because that's Thessalonica, the key city to the whole area of Macedonia, a big, important area to the Romans. And he's not going to like the fact that there are people there who are saying, I don't worship Caesar anymore. I now worship Jesus. This unemployed carpenter from nobody ever heard of, from Israel. And that's hard work. And we join our sister church from that time to this time to do exactly the same thing here, in a town that also is not happy with the message of Jesus. This is a town that's happy with the message of what? Affluence, right? Or power, or sexuality, or a number of other issues. But not giving yourself away, and not God. That's not the issue. But we're in that adventure right now. We're doing that. We're doing that right here. And there's a scene at the end of the movie, which I really loved. It's the last shot. You see this happens right after the crocodiles, by the way, so I was still cheering when this scene came on. There's this, he's Lord Greystoke, right, in England, and when the movie opens, he's got on these, like, beautiful clothes, and Jane has on beautiful clothes, and they live in this big mansion. And you shoot back to the mansion, and the bed's perfectly made, the shades are drawn, it's rather dark in there. No one slept in that bed for months. There's a dining room. Tables are all pulled up. No one's eaten there for months. The whole mansion is dark. It's unused. And then you slide over to this sunny African hillside. Late afternoon, this tan orange kind of sun glows on these people. It's the guys. The guys are all waiting there. And then they cut to the women coming out of the birth shack or whatever it's called with this newborn baby. It's little Tarzan Jr., okay? Very exciting moment. Everybody's singing. Everybody's happy. He's in a great place. He's with his friends. He has no power here. He has no money here. He has nothing that he has there. But this is where he's supposed to be. And I think that's an analogy I can take to church on Sunday. I'm supposed to be here doing this, not resting over here in this. This is where I'm supposed to be. Do we get that? Do we understand that? Now, for each one of us, how we live this out in the days ahead is going to be different. We are not people that have common lives. We go all kinds of different ways in this room. And when we come here as people who've all, been in a classroom somewhere, it's very easy to say, oh, that's interesting. I got notes on that, so I'm okay. and walk out. But that's not what we're supposed to do. So I'm going to use another movie illustration for you. I love the first Star Trek, of the new Star Trek movies. I love the first one, where Captain Kirk is kind of brand new to this, right? Didn't quite know what he's doing. But he's in the captain's chair, and they're fighting this insurmountable enemy, as they always are. And they come up against him, and the weapons are all loaded. And so he gives the command. And what is his command? He says, "Do it, do it, do it," because he doesn't know what else to say, right? And they fire everything. They fire everything at this ship. Remember that scene? Anybody remember that scene? Do it, do it, do it, he says. Okay, this is my application part of the sermon, okay? Do it. Do it. Do it. Yeah? Okay? Can we do this? Can we understand that we are invited to be like the church at Thessalonica? And to use Paul as our example, what he writes, how he writes it, how he prays, how he gets concerned for them, and also what he teaches. Can we assimilate that? Because when we do, we're moving into Christ-likeness. We're moving into God-likeness. We're putting off the old self and putting on the new. We're being transformed by the renewing of our minds. All that is what we're doing, little by little. And don't ever think that God does not engineer your day to put events in it that push you against this, so you'll begin to think differently. Even this very morning, as I've been doing this message, I've been pushed already and think, okay, God, that's pretty funny. I'm the one who's telling the message. You can't push me. That's not right. I have to tell everybody else this. But already he's pushing me. He does this daily for all of us because that's how much he cares that we get it. So I invite you to think about that. I invite you to do it.
Thank you for listening to Cornerstone West Los Angeles. For more information, please visit us on the web at cornerstonewla.org.